My name is Eric Stragalis. I am the president and chief strategist here at StitchDX. I also head up our digital workplace practice. And like so many of you, I think the one constant that we've experienced over the last 19 or 20 months has been change. We've all had to learn to adapt and readapt again to this constantly changing environment around us. And I think that really probably came to a head over the summer months, particularly as people were starting to travel more and restaurants and businesses were opening up and families were preparing for kids to go back to school again. So I think that a lot of people had probably high hopes that we would be seeing a change back to some sense of normalcy, whatever that means these days. And organizations were also making their plans to bring people back to the office and readying their workplaces for employees to come back in. That is, of course, until the Delta variant reared its ugly head, and organizations had to make some tough decisions about whether or not they were going to delay their plans or whether they were going to bring people back to the office at all. In fact, we did a survey that we ran with Powell Software at the end of the summer, asking this specific question about what they were planning on doing. And almost 60% of all respondents said they were going to either delay or they were considering delaying their plans. And some organizations, as we know, some very large ones like Amazon, for example, made the decision to go completely remote altogether for the foreseeable future. So we're going to be talking a little bit more about that survey a little bit later. But, just thinking generally about the digital workplace, the digital workplace has actually allowed us to be flexible and adaptable to these changes, allowing us to work from home and have these sort of delayed plans of getting back into the office. But we've adapted a lot, and all this adapting and flexibility has its challenges. It's got human challenges as workers and employees are being effectively siloed and being asked to learn new tools and adapt to these new tools and processes on the fly. Technological challenges in how we use those tools effectively, efficiently, and consistently throughout the organization. And organizational challenges in how we keep employees aligned to the vision and the mission of the business and keep workers motivated and productive collaborators from wherever they may be. So today, we're actually going to talk about all of these things, and we're going to talk about how we can build better digital workplaces with the tools that we already have. And we've got a lot of great people that are going to be joining us today as well. So we've got a lot to fit in, as I mentioned, and I'd like to say don't forget to stick around until the end. We will have our drawing for the Sonos Move smart speaker that is valued at $400. And I'm trying to pull up my other slide here, so just bear with me for a second. This is our agenda for the day. And so we've got a lot of people that are going to be talking, and I promise that it's going to be worth it for you to stick around till the very end. Speaking of valuable speakers, our first speaker today is someone that I've become a great admirer of. His name is Matt Weston, and he is a Microsoft MVP. He's a Powell Software evangelist, and he's joining us from the UK. So I'd like to welcome Matt. Thanks so much for joining us.
Hi, Eric. Thank you for having me. It's really good to be here and speaking to everybody today.
Great to have you. Thank you so much. We are excited for you to tell us more about what you're seeing out there and what some of the challenges that you're seeing out there are of this new hybrid life that we're living.
Fantastic. Yeah. So let's dive into it. So I'm really going to be talking to you to start off with about the challenges of hybrid work. So I could be talking about some of the key aspects, such as the technology aspects, but I'm going to start off with something a little bit softer. So I'm going to really set the scene by talking about what our landscape was like before the COVID pandemic. So our landscape as it was, particularly in terms of the employees that we had within our organizations, really took one of two flavors. We had those people who were working at home and they were working remotely, and we had those people who were working in the office. Now, if we look back, how simple was that concept of we only need to really cater for these two groups of people. We were able to supply remote equipment. We were able to supply remote telephony in order to make those people work. We were able to look after everybody who was in the office. And generally, the two groups really split into two camps. They either engaged or they didn't engage. And that was almost the normal, especially in a lot of the organizations that I worked with and for. But over the last 18 months, those lines have been blurred. And really, we now have a completely different type of workforce. And the biggest challenge that we will have going forward is really understanding what this new workforce looks like. And I've tried to pigeonhole the groups of people that we are going to be working with going post-pandemic in this new hybrid world. We can categorize them, but they all come with their own little challenges. So number one on my list is we've got a part-time home worker. So someone who spends some of their time at home, spends some of their time in the office. They probably don't have the right sort of setup at home. They make do with what they've got. It could be the dining room. It could be being sat in a corner of the bedroom. They've generally got quite a good technology setup, though. They know that part of their time at home is going to be working, so they set themselves up with a place where they don't really have any distractions. And those distractions could be children, it could be pets, all of those key things that we have seen that have caused distractions over the previous year. So we have to be mindful of how we engage group number one. But what about group number two? Our home workers. They are permanently at home because they have to really balance family and work. So I appreciate that so many people who are watching today and have joined us would have been in this position where you are sharing your working space with other members of the family. How many times have we seen the cat walk across the keyboard on somebody when somebody's been on a camera? We're in a position where we are having to work with whatever space we can find. We don't have that dedicated area. Maybe our technology setup isn't the greatest. It's not conducive to what we would normally traditionally think of as a traditional workplace. So we have to be mindful for those people who are going to be at home but have all of these distractions. But we've also got the professional home worker. And these are home workers who generally have a great setup. They have an area which has no distractions, have great technology, great Wi-Fi, and that dedicated workspace. So something like what I've got here in my home office, where I've got a camera, I've got lights, I've got all of the things that I need in order to do my job effectively. So these are the people who are going to be working from home, as Eric said in his opening address. These are the people who, like Amazon, who are permanently remote. They are gearing up to be for this to be the normal for them going forward. But there's also what I see as the unsung group. This is a group of employees who are working from home, who are having to make do, but have never had any engagement with the business. Think about all of these people who have joined an organization during lockdown. They've never been to their actual place of work. They've never met their colleagues. There are people in PAL Software I've not had the ability to meet just because of lockdown. And sometimes those people may feel isolated. They may feel that like they're not getting the support. So we have to be very mindful that we do have these groups of people within our organization as well. And then finally, as industries do open back up, as we do start going back into the office, we do have our office workers as well. But we've now got 5 distinct groups of people who we could potentially be have within our organization. They all have different needs. They all have different ways of engaging. They all have their own challenges that they are facing. So how do we really go through and address those challenges? Well, we need to identify what those challenges are right from the word go. So the challenges that we are facing, how we communicate. Technology has innovated so quickly over the last 12 months that we are now able to communicate effectively with all of these groups. We're able to drive those communications through formal methods, whether they are through meetings, whether they are through one-to-ones, or whether they are through aspects such as how we maybe a virtual coffee. So being able to really utilize all of these technologies from a communications perspective. But communication is only really one aspect of what we're talking about here. We're also talking about how we keep people engaged. So communication is okay. What we want is those people who, regardless of where they are working, we want them to feel like they are part of the organization. We want them to feel like they are there to be heard, that they have a voice, that they are able to reach out to somebody and somebody is going to be there for them. This is the employee engagement aspect. This is one of the biggest challenges that we have seen over the last 18 months. Now, there are so many ways that we can resolve that, or at least alleviate that. We can start to push forward towards the digital workplace, and we'll talk more of that throughout the entire session this morning. But we need to make sure that our employees are engaged. But at the same time, we still need to foster that productivity. We still need to be driving our organization forward. We still need to be operating. So we have not only the challenge of communication and engagement, but also how we balance those with what we are actually outputting. How we really push forward, how we still work together, how we work as a team, because the teamwork is what is going to give us the results. So again, fostering all of this into what could be a digital workplace, we need to meet these challenges. But what I've just described is very organizational focused. How do we get people talking? How do we get people to contribute? How do we get people to work? But we've got the balance challenge. So how do we make sure that while we are driving all of this, while we are still trying to get the best out of our people, while we are in this hybrid workplace, how do we make sure that we are maintaining that work-life balance? Now, the technologies that we are going to be talking about as we go through the sessions and some of the statistics that we'll be talking about will highlight how technologies such as what we do within Powell with regards to our virtual coffee machine, how Microsoft Viva is coming through to help you maintain that balance. We have a challenge where, as an organization, we need to be able to promote that balance. We need to make sure that our employees at all levels of the organization are having that positive balance within their work and within their life. Because what happens if we don't? We burn out. And that's going to then start to have a negative effect. It's going to start to exacerbate all of those challenges which we've just been talking about, where all of a sudden we're becoming less engaged because we are so tired. We have packed so much into our days without any breaks, without any respite, that actually I'm disengaging now. If I'm disengaging, my productivity is going down. I'm communicating less. So what was now was just a challenge is now an out-and-out problem. Now, we as PAL Software and StitchDX, we really put the digital workplace at the center of everything that we're talking about. What is a better way of trying to meet all of those challenges? By looking at the way technology works, the way that we can implement it within a business and within an organization, not as a replacement of all of those key aspects, not as a way of isolating or further isolating those different workers, but how we can make it a much more inclusive environment, how we can bring people back together, how we can replicate those physical types of interactions. This is what we see as a digital workplace. And these are the sorts of things that we are going to be talking about throughout the rest of the session today. But with a digital workplace at your fingertips, there is only so much that technology and implementation can do. There is a challenge for you. The challenge for you as an organization, for business leaders, for influencers, for people who are utilizing the technologies. You are facing potentially, as we start to figure out what this new normal looks like, you are facing an uphill climb. Now, how much of a climb that is entirely up to you, entirely up to the types of practices that you implement, the types of engagements that you put in place. We are here to help. The technology is here to help. But the big question that I want to leave you with before I hand back over to Eric is, throughout today, ask yourself, how will you meet the challenge? Thank you, Eric. I can see your lips moving, Eric. You're on mute at the moment.
I literally just said to myself, I'm on mute. This is just the world that we live in, I guess. Thanks, Matt. I really appreciate it. I love your slides, and I love your story and the way that you describe it. And that is really sort of the human challenge that I was talking about that we're struggling with. And you know, the reality is that we have the tools at the ready. It's the tools that enabled us to be successful throughout the pandemic that are going to help us be successful as we're living with this now in the future. Can't really say it's post-pandemic yet, and I'm not sure that we ever will, but we're ready for whatever comes our way. So I'm really excited to talk a little bit more about that survey report that you heard me talk about at the beginning, and I'd like to now invite my good friend and colleague Brian Bolton to join me in this conversation. Brian, thanks so much for being here with us.
Well, where else would I be?
I don't know, but I'm glad you're here.
Me too. And you just alluded to the fact that we all hope that maybe we were in a post-pandemic phase, and that never seemed to really materialize. So, you know, I think we've alluded to this a lot already, but, you know, back in call them the halcyon pre-Delta days over the summer, you know, there was that time where we briefly all thought we were entering that post-COVID phase, and, you know, everything was just going to completely reopen. And I went to, well, we've still been going to those, but I went to a packed Fenway Park game and was like not even kind of worried about things. You know, during that phase, StitchDX and Palo Software, we got together to, you know, survey 200 leaders in IT, HR, and internal comms and marketing. And we really wanted to understand how the technologies that we all gravitated to back at the beginning of the pandemic, and these were all technologies that we were using, right? But they weren't as critical to our day-to-day operations because you were able to just pop into somebody's office and do things in person that you no longer were able to do. So we were using these technologies, but just not in the same level of criticality that we suddenly were thrust into. And so we wanted to understand, you know, how all of those technologies were going to be impacting the workplace that we were, I'll say, quote unquote, returning to, or not. And we wanted to learn how effective they were. We wanted to understand, you know, their impact on and how they were affecting the expectations for the future of work. And learn this all in the context of that expected return to the physical office. And as I've just mentioned, and as Eric had mentioned earlier on, COVID definitely had other ideas, and things changed over the summer. So they changed so much that we actually did do that additional survey question that Eric alluded to, where we found that 60% of people that we surveyed had delayed their return to work plans. So things like masking returned in certain locations. So the building that I'm sitting in right now, we were mask free mostly over the summer. Masking came back when we're walking in public spaces. Technically, we're supposed to be wearing a mask in this room because there's 2 people in it, but we're not. Vaccination mandates became a source of conflict for many people, but we're not going to get into that because that's not what this is about. So, you know, while we were writing the report, as Delta was surging, we were a little worried that maybe the results weren't going to be, you know, accurate. And but in scrutinizing the data that we collected and in that overall context, things really still stayed largely intact. Maybe some delays, things like that, but the overall trends that we were able to discern from the data, that stayed true. So Eric, as I keep referring to, and as he referred to me as his good friend earlier, he was responsible for most of the report development. So I'm going to turn it back to Eric and just ask him, what to summarize sort of what he found as the key findings from the report.
Thanks, Brian. I think the big takeaway here for me, and we've talked a lot about this, is that the reality is that where we work is actually far less important than how we work. And understanding that organizations and leaders who are focused on how their people are working and how they're enabling them to work, those are the organizations that are going to thrive, right? And it's not just about the pandemic. There's lots of reasons why we want to have a stronger digital workplace. For example, there fires in California, right? That has kept people from being able to travel and work. And there's all kinds of reasons why you might want to have a stronger digital workplace, because you're going to have to go remote unexpectedly. But the reality is that you've got employees and this workforce now that is expecting people to work remotely. In fact, we in our survey, when we talked to people, the vast majority of respondents said that they would be working remotely. In fact, I think it ended up being somewhere in like the 80% range of all of our respondents said they were either going to be working 50% remotely or more. And that might not be shocking, it might not be that surprising, but when you look at some organizations that have been very traditionally in the office, because that's just how they were, that's how they operated, this can be a very, very big dramatic shift. And we'll talk actually with an organization a little bit later on that went through exactly that situation. Now they're going back partly remote, partly in office, and there are solutions for how you bring those people together. And that's another big challenge. It's not just about the hybrid. It's not just about remote, it's about hybrid. And how do you bring together people who are working from home and from working in the office, or even salespeople who are out in the field potentially again traveling? How do you bring them all together? How do you keep them unified and aligned on the vision and the mission of the organization? So those are the challenges that we're seeing, and I think that the big takeaway again was where you work is actually less important today than how you work, and I think leaders are really starting to think a lot more about what do we need to do to empower and enable people to be able to work from anywhere.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, Eric. And one of the things that we saw in the responses that came back were 78% of respondents to the survey said that the importance of digital workplace technology was very or extremely important to their overall digital investment strategy. And I bet you that is that if we had asked that same question pre-COVID, it would be a lot lower. So we've certainly seen just that become critical to the way companies are able to operate, especially as we're in this hybrid environment that we don't know when that will have an end. So just in regards to that, and companies and customers that we talk to, does that sort of align with what you're hearing around just how important companies are finding digital workplace investment?
Yeah, I mean, maybe not surprisingly, this is actually one of the areas where people are investing a lot more in, right? And we think about how important the workplace has been. Like the physical workplace has been super important. We think about how much we've invested in that, right? Over the last couple of decades, we've gone from being in, enclosed office spaces to opening everything up. People lost walls. They got rid of offices. They got rid of cubicle walls even, and you had these shared desks that people were just sitting at with no with no barriers, and now we're putting barriers back up, right? These plexiglass barriers to keep everybody safe. It's amazing how much of a shift we've had to make from investing a lot in our workplaces. But when we gave up our workplaces for our personal spaces, we gave up a lot more than just conference room meetings. And it felt like at least at the beginning of the pandemic, that was what we were replacing, right? We had Zoom and we had Teams, and we maybe had Slack, and we were able to bring everybody together on a phone call very, very quickly and easily, or on a video call very quickly and easily. But then when that video call was done, what do you do? How do I stay in touch? Am I just chatting with people? Do I have to schedule another video call with individuals? How do you collaborate and work when you don't have that shared space? And when we gave up our physical workplaces for our personal workspaces, we gave up dropping into somebody's office, or dropping by somebody's desk, or running into somebody at the coffee machine, or going out to lunch with somebody even. And those are the places where collaboration happens, right? A lot of times that is specifically where collaboration tends to happen. So we have had to adapt to that, and we've had to rely on technology and tools to do that. And I don't think everyone's done a great job with it. And so what can we do about that? There are lots of solutions. In our next session, we're actually going to show you how to solve that. But that's one of the big challenges that we're seeing. And again, respondents to our survey said this is important. It's not only is it important, it's very important, and it's extremely important. And the plan is to be investing in the digital workplace. And why is this important? It's important. It's important for two reasons. Number one is your digital workplace is now your the critical advantage, right? If you want to go out to the workforce and you want to bring people in, and you're excited about bringing new people in, the digital workplace is going to be one of those things that gives you the critical edge, the competitive edge that you need, not just for your employees, but think about how that employee experience impacts the customer experience on the other side, and making sure that you can provide a consistent and positive customer experience for your employees. So there's a lot here that I think people need to be thinking about, and people need to be aware of, that it's important to be investing in this, because this is the future.
Agree. I mean, it really brings to that the term I keep hearing a lot today around your digital headquarters, right? So we're not so naive to think that, oh, everybody's just going to be working remotely. There are industries that remote work doesn't work for, and there are companies that won't adapt to it. But what we're seeing is companies kind of embracing this concept of not just having a physical headquarters, but also having a digital headquarters, and they're making those investments. And I mean, it's going to take a little while, I think, to shake out. Companies that will sort of aggressively adapt to having a digital headquarters and having a great experience for employees to be able to work remotely, work in a hybrid environment, they're going to attract certain types of employees, and they're going to become a certain company. And companies that don't do that are going to attract other types of employees and be a different type of company. So right. I think there's things that are just going to shake out going forward in all this. And I guess that sort of lends itself to another question, like, do we think hybrid is here to stay, or do we think that in 12 months from now we could be doing this summit and it wouldn't make sense because most companies at that point aren't using hybrid anymore? Or do we think it's really here? It's a real trend. It's not going away.
I don't see any way that it goes away. I mean, if you think about this, this is actually something we've been moving towards this for years, right? Flexibility in the workplace and the ability and the desire to have more flexibility in the workplace is something that has been around for decades, I would say. It's not just a new thing. So I think people have had the taste of it. I don't necessarily think everyone loves being at home and working remotely all the time. I think the physical workplace is still necessary, but I think it takes a totally different a role. And I almost see it now as kind of like an offsite. What we used to do when we were working in a workplace where we were always there and we were always together is that we would go somewhere else, right? To get things done and to be more productive. We would leave the workplace. We would gather everybody and take them to a hotel, or we would go off to some, conference. Or the idea was that getting out of that place was important. Well, now we're out. And so getting back into that place will be important, but it will be important for the same reason that getting out of that workplace was important. And we can do it for small periods of time where we can bring everyone together, for big collaboration, and then we can all go back to the way that we work remotely. I think one of the things that's important to call out, Brian, though, is that there are a lot of challenges with that, right?
I was going to ask you. So
some of the big challenges that come from that are, and these are the things that we heard directly from our survey. The biggest three, I would say, are data sprawl. What happens with all that data when we are all remote and we're all working from different places? How do we control all of this data, and who has access to it, and where we're going to hold it, and what the naming conventions are going to be, so that if somebody does leave, we can make sure we've got continuity. And then the access and the utilization of all the tools that we have. I don't have a graphic for this, but I believe that it was somewhere in the range of like 70% of respondents said that they had 2 or more collaboration tools, 2 or more, which, if you think about it, that doesn't include email, by the way. It's like Slack and Teams were the top 2. So if you have 2 or more collaboration tools, where do you go when you need to collaborate with somebody? And so, this was a quote that we got from that survey. We haven't previously had restrictions on what we can use. So people are just using all different kinds of things to get their work done. And so this just raises a whole level of concern for IT, particularly around things like shadow IT, right? When SASP has become the standard and everyone can access anything, we start to see these tools pop up, and everyone has different things, and they all have different places to store things. And now you just create this whole new level of challenges. This is stuff that was happening, by the way, before remote work, but it's just become way, way, way more of a problem now. So this is a big concern for the new hybrid workplace, and we need to find ways, to solve this. And there are ways to solve it. And the reality is that the tools that you have at your disposal right now, I would say, are actually the solutions for that.
Well, so in that, in that hybrid world, right? When we talk about it from the employee perspective, what do they need to be as effective as they were in that on-premise workplace that they were used to before?
Yeah, I would say the number one thing, the most important thing, is finding ways to integrate collaboration and communication. We rely a lot on communication. We've relied on it a lot for, forever, really, but particularly over the last, 19, 20 months that we've been doing this officially. And now we've realized, well, this is going to continue, so we need to have something that's more solidly in place. And so thinking more and more about not just how do we communicate information out to the organization, and we don't rely on email for everything, and we don't rely on somebody picking up the phone and calling, the HQ for everything. How do we now bring together the tools that we use for collaboration and the tools for communication together so we can build a true digital workplace? And I think a lot of organizations are thinking about this and trying to figure this out. And the reality is that if you're a Microsoft user, you've got O365 licensing, you have the tools. Now it's just a question of managing the data sprawl and managing the data sprawl, managing the governance, and then ensuring that people are utilizing it correctly and providing that sort of pathway for users. And so this is really important. This is important for every organization, and there's a realization about that. So this is, the results of our survey showed that people really valued that. They recognize that this is an important investment that needs to happen, and that they're going to be prioritizing that. And again, this is the competitive advantage that I think a lot of organizations are starting to recognize that if you have these tools at the ready, you'll be better and more prepared for for whatever comes in the future. So I think that's really the critical element here.
Agree. Well, I think this sounds like a good segue into our next segment.
You're right, it is. And for that,
thanks everyone.
Thanks, Brian. Thanks for that chat. I always like talking about this. So anyone who's attending this and is interested in talking about it, we'll throw up some information at the end so that you can contact us if you have any questions. Feel free to reach out. I'm very excited to introduce the next two speakers. These are people that we work with pretty regularly, and they're pretty awesome guys. Anthony and Philippe, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us, and I'm excited to see what you guys are going to share with us around controlling sprawl and bringing it all together. Philippe, I'll pass it off to you.
Thank you very much, Eric. A good morning to you all, and a good afternoon from sunny West London for me. So my name is Philippe Gomez, and I am the country manager for Powell Software in the UK. I'm also acting as a director at the moment in the US, which is very exciting. And that gets me to work with you guys and with Anthony, who is joining me today for demoing what I'm going to talk to you about. Anthony?
Yeah, absolutely. Really excited to be here.
Want to maybe introduce yourself quickly?
Oh, I'm absolutely happy to do so. Yeah, so Anthony McGinnis, I'm lucky enough to be a senior solutions engineer here at Powell. I'm really excited to sort of join. I have an extensive background in UX and collaboration. So I think it really ties in well with what's been discussed so far and how we can really start to put some proper controls in and really heighten the experience, whether you're on-site or off-site for your user base.
So jumping on what you were talking about earlier on, Eric, so controlling the sprawl of data, the sprawl of teams, and bringing it all together. And I think the success of teams during the pandemic obviously has led a lot of people within the digital workplace space to question how the intranet was going to evolve, whether it was going to be on Teams, whether intranet still had a future, and I think that was the wrong debate to have. One thing that we know is that Teams is today 250 million active users in the world. So that's up 145 million back in April. So it's exponential. It's not going anywhere, obviously, and it's victim of its own success because it's creating massive headaches as everyone is now experiencing for users, but also for IT to manage those environments. So the main problems that we see from our customers for users is really about information overload. Too many teams, I can't find the info I need. And for the IT, it's really about the exponential sprawl of data and teams, and how do I comply with my security and governance company policies. So that's a major headache for them, and I think that the main challenge we see is that they're trying to achieve a fine balance between, on one end, promoting the best practices, right? When you create a team, ensuring that you comply to the company policies, right, and security policies, and at the same time not having strict rules that impeds the productivity of the users on the platform, which is now widely adopted. So it's really about regaining control of the environment while trying to boost adoption and productivity of the users. How do we do that? Technology can help, and we have a technology answer to that, which is not imposing strict rules, but guiding the user basically to make it easy for him to adopt the solution. So one way to do that, to make it easy to create teams, to have the right predefined policies within it. It's to have everything right at the outset. The applications that you need, all the controls that need to be in place in line with your company policy by using templates. I give you an example. As a sales leader, I use a lot of RFPs, like in a lot of companies. That is a process that is repetitive, automative, and that we'll use pretty much the same kind of resources. So we're going to have legal documents, for instance, RFP template response documents. We're going to have a planner, for instance. So business applications that we need on every single one RFP. So if I have everything at the outset, obviously with all the security rules in place, obviously that helps me adopt the platform much quicker. On the other end, for the IT teams, it's all about ensuring that the end users are following company best practices. It's streamlining the provision process of creating a team, right? We know it's in place. We know it's respecting the rules we've put in the first place. And it's also understanding your environment through dashboarding, what's going on in my environment. It's about the lifecycle management of your teams. And again, it is all about controlling the team's sprawl. Do I ever need a team in the first place? That's sometimes a question we have. Having a minimum number of owners, for instance, all right? Sometimes, another channel, OneDrive, for instance, or simply a conversation for email with 2 people might be enough. So it is about guiding the user on using the best practices within that environment. Life cycle, teams exploration. Is there any dead teams within your environment? How can I manage and obviously take appropriate action to remediate that? Reporting, again, inactive, expired teams. Do I have the minimum owner and members? So again, having control and giving, obviously, a view on my environment. And now I believe Anthony is going to show us a snapshot of how it looks like.
Absolutely. So I'm going to go ahead and just jump into our environment here and just sort of show you what we've been discussing so far. So really, there's this concept of not creating roadblocks for your users and impeding their experience, but being able to create guardrails that can lead them to be successful in their work and the most impactful as possible. So we do that in a couple of ways, and we've sort of gone through a list, but I'd love to show you sort of how that looks in real time. So as you can see here, I'm on what's called our Powell Teams dashboard, which is fully integrated into Teams. And what I can do as an end user is I can go ahead and create a new team. When that's done, you're actually going to be presented with our custom wizard that's going to walk you through everything that you need to do to be successful. And what's great about that is you can create and target specific templates so that people know that can pick what type of work they're trying to do and execute on that. So in our case here, I'm just going to do the classic template, and we'll see just there's an app included here, and this is just a general template. And I'm just going to go through, and what I'm going to be presented with is a series of questions that have been set up by your administrators, just asking what we're doing, getting some key data points that can be leveraged later on. So we're going to go through this real quickly here. So for instance, if I can go here, say this is a marketing team based in the US. This is going to be for my customers. Why am I creating this team? Well, in this case, it's for demos. But you can use this data point to see and reference without having to ask somebody why this team is in existence, going back to Philippe's earlier point. And then also, who's my default contact for this team? Now, of course, you can have 5, 6 owners on a team, and you should have more than one owner. But who is the person I should reach out if I have any questions? And then when we see the team expiration, if we look here, we can actually add in and say how long we expect this team to exist, so that we don't just create a team that we're only going to be using for, let's say, a short-term project, and it exists in perpetuity until somebody actually goes in and does that sort of spring cleaning or audit. So we can start to answer those questions, and then we can have some type of automation that takes place using Powell Teams that will go ahead and make that team archived and inactive. So I see now, because I've been filling that out, I have marketing US, and I can now name it. I'm going to name this Anthony. And then after that, we have a bit of governance that we can start to apply. So we're going to automatically set this as a private team. You can have a minimum amount of owners or members. In this case, we have default Linda for the owner, and we also can add in default users if we know that there's always going to be a group of users that are included. I need 3 users to be able to move forward, so I'm going to go ahead and add those. We'll just add Mark here, and we'll add Frederick. Now that we've met all our requirements, we can move forward. I have a general summary of everything I just did, so I can use this for reference, and I'm going to create the team. Now, maybe we want approvals. In this case, we are going to have an approval that's requested, so we can have that sent out to the business lead. It can go to IT. It can go to whatever group you want so that they can go through and approve that. And we actually do have an API as well if you want to tie into something such as ServiceNow if you wanted to. So now that we've done that, we can actually go back. I'm going to go over to my approval section. I am an approver. We're going to use our native UI for now. So I can see that now has been requested and I happen to be my own approver. So I'm going to go into this. And it's because we've pulled in all that great information, we're actually going to be able to see immediately that we have pending approvals. You may have seen in the lower right side, we actually even have a bot that will notify everybody who is an approver that this has been sent out. And so now I can go through, see all the information, and I'm not just getting a request that says, hey, this team wants to be created. I'm getting relevant information that I can use to help me make my decisions, such as that, why is it being created and how long do I need this for? And I can accept or decline. In this case, I'll decline and say, not enough info. So even with those quick steps and little guardrails, you've now made a much better experience for your end users because they understand what's going on. And you'll see with those cards that just came through, we've automated a lot of those processes so that people don't have to jump around or not understand where they stand in their current approval process. Another part I would love to show you is the ability to take some of this information. You'll notice on the left side, I have a lot of different refiners. These are called tags. Tags are things that we allow you to do with your teams, very much like if you're familiar with SharePoint, where you can start to put categorization to your teams so that you can understand why teams are being created, and you can start to enact policies around that, or just have more relevant information for your leadership. So if I go to reports here, reporting, I'm actually going to pull up, we've taken this information, and I'll show you sort of where it lives at in a moment here, but we've taken all this information in this case, and we've actually put it into a Power BI report, where now I can see very quickly without having to go and pull a report, run a PowerShell script, anything along those lines, that I have 119 teams, which ones don't have templates, so which ones are not following policy of about 24, how many have guests, and other information. And then I can go down here, and because I have certain categorizations, I can understand how many teams are being created in each template. So how many HR teams have been created? We have 13, we have 5 sales, and well, that's with sales, and then yeah, with the sales RFP, we have 15. So this gives us a lot of information that we can start to pull and say, okay, well, how many members are there of each team? So we have 35 with only 2 members, 27 with 4 members. And so now I have a very easy to digest report that I can now take and start to make different decisions and understand as my team's environment grows, what's happening and why. And it really helps to make choices moving forward to keep a clean environment set up and to add in new governance and policies that you may want to implement later on. I'm going to jump back to Apollo Teams just for a moment here. And I just want to show you that's just one way to sort of take in those reports, but I'm going to jump into our admin center here real quickly. And I'm going to go into the report section. Now, every report you see here, you can of course get it in Excel, CSV, or you can also do what we just did there, where you can use our API to tie it into some type of reporting database. But one of the ones I love, for instance, is the inactive teams. So I have 62 teams. I have a lot of inactive teams here, 45. But if I go click see more, I can start to understand which teams are not being used, and I can take action on those if I want. And I can see, 30 days, 60 days, and so on and so forth. And I can do that based on no access and also data document modification, which is real nice because sometimes the team's being accessed purely because someone clicks on it, that resets the timer, but maybe no one's done anything with the document for 30 days. So we can start to take all that information. And then using a lot of your Microsoft tool set you already had, you can do things like associate and automation. So if something falls in this report, you send an email or you use our automated bots to just notify all the owners that, hey, this team hasn't been used. We're going to archive after X amount of time. And so you can take a lot of those steps that you would normally do in a manual fashion and start to create proactive methods to take care of that, so that as you're going through and your organization's growing and your team's environment is growing, you are seeing that full actual life cycle take place without you manually having to go through and do that. It's really useful for any point that you are in your life, in your growth, in your journey with teams, because it can help you in retroactive fashion, as well as it can help you if you're just getting started in your team's journey. So these are just a couple things, and of course there's a lot more, but I'm going to take a moment and just hand back off to Philippe, and I think we have another section we want to sort of talk about within Powell Teams. Philippe, are you there?
Yes, I am on mute. As most people. Yes, I mean, good transition. We're going to talk about Powell intranet in Teams, or an intranet in Teams, and you know, we don't have the panacea. No one does, I believe, and it's old, trial and error and you know, testing all the time. But when it comes to digital workplace solutions from the technology standpoint, I mean, we're firm believers that should be 3 pillars, very important. It should be simple and well designed when it comes to an intranet, because it is really about driving the adoption, and the design will have its importance, the simplicity. So if we look at consumer type of platforms, this is the expectation when it comes to search, when it comes to navigating your intranet. The expectation, it must be as easy as the application I use every day in my private life. So it needs to be user-centric as well, and that's really something where we do invest. And by user-centric, I mean 2 things, which is obviously information which is tailored to your job, tailored to you, tailored to your location, and so on. But most importantly, it is about how do I consume information? What is my style of communication? So it's not about the intranet being that smart or that well designed, so I invite everyone to consume it, or create some features that's going to make it more adopted. It is about going where the user is sitting, whether it's on its mobile or whether is like me, for instance, using Teams all the time in my job, because I work on project-related tasks, for instance. And so to that, it needs to encompass basically communication and collaboration. So 2 platforms. One is the intranet, the other one is a collaboration platform, and it does need to encompass that, because the 2 have a very different role. One will be more about, obviously, the top-down communication. How do you foster culture, for instance, value of a company and general information? The other one will be about where the job gets done, where do we work, and it's project-related tasks. So that's why when it comes to us and our strategy, it is really about embedding the intranet within Teams, and making sure that if you are within Teams, you can access your intranet, and that does help the adoption when it comes to the intranet. Think, for instance, when I have my mobile and I'm accessing through Teams, I have already within it embedded all the functionalities of my intranet. So for employees, obviously, the advantage are multiple. It's a complete portal, all-in-one applications, as well as communication and collaboration, access to HR departments, all department pages tailored, again, to my role or anything that I choose to receive. Another aspect that we're trying also to bridge is the concept of virtual building, and how during the pandemic we've been trying to innovate to try to recreate those social random interactions that we used to have in the workplace. It's not an easy task, but it is about trying to to reach to your weak ties, right? You don't know who you don't know within the company, and it's a massive source of value, obviously. So how do we recreate those moments? That's also something we're going to talk about. For IT, I think it's the next slide.
No, I think nope. I think we're actually good. I'm going to go ahead and take over and sort of just show you what that looks like.
Go on.
In just one moment. There we go. Perfect. So yeah, to before I sort of really jump into it, what I would say is you really are coming to this precipice where, and of course you talked about hybrid, and the fact that there's always going to be this concept of people working remote now. So we're at this precipice where how do we blend the experiences so no matter where people are in not just the office, you know, even at home, but in the world, they can be impactful and get their work done. And we're not, once again, creating barriers to get, you know, having to, and I think Eric made a great point earlier, having to hit 3-4 different places to get one thing done. So whereas your intranet and your company portal used to be this concept of a place to go to do things, now it's bringing all your work to where you are now. And that's really brings us to what Powell Intranet is able to do using Teams and Powell Teams. So we can actually take your intranet that you've built, and we have a great one set up here with Powell Intranet, and bring it into your Teams so that you're not asking people to go to a different browser to or a different URL to get their work done. They can do it directly here. So when they're in Teams, they have a question, they need to search a document, they can do so. So if I was working with my Teams and someone said, hey, can you find this? We all know in Teams it's virtually impossible to find documentation unless you're in the specific team, in the specific repository you're looking for. But I can actually jump into my intranet, come through, do a search, and sure enough, I can use a much more advanced UI to do so, search something out like Powell, for instance. We can even include your org chart, and so that you can actually start looking up resources and people within your people directory, so you don't have to go to Workday or another space to find information around that person. And even above, we can start to do things, and of course, news, we can aggregate, bring in all that extra great and rich information and data that you have living in your environment directly into Teams to make it really easy. Now here we have it on the rail. You can see it's a little bit lower, but we can actually even have that as the first thing that opens. And because it's integrated in Teams, you're not just getting it on the desktop, but you're going to get it, as you see here, in your browser, as well as if you were using your Teams application on your phone. So you're getting it in a multitude of ways, and it's fully responsive, so you know that people are always getting the best experience possible. And when we talk about, you know, specific use cases and some really cool extra features, I know we have a lot of popularity around what's called our booking tool, which allows you to come in, see what's available as far as couches, desks, even, you know, a TV or a coffee maker. But you can actually have this built in. You can add it to here, and then people on their phone are going to be able to go through, book out that that desk, that space that they need to quickly run into, and they don't have to use something like Outlook, which would is primarily used for just rooms. Maybe you do want to go ahead and do desks, or you're in a hoteling situation in your office, and people are you know, flying by, and they need to be able to quickly see if there's space for them to come in and work. So this really ties in and connects to that, and allows people to be very specific in what they're trying to do and have a space to get that done. A couple of other things I always love to call out: we have our community space, so that you're able to just have, you know, make that connection. And I think when we all move to hybrid, and what we've seen from the employee base a lot is that, yes, work has been consistent and people, of course, seem to be getting their work done, but there is a disconnection, and you lost that sort of community feel that we used to have. And so how do we do that? Well, we create spaces, and we talked about the virtual coffee machine and sort of this virtual building concept. But really what it comes down to is creating spaces for people to feel comfortable to have conversations that aren't directly me calling you, talking about exactly what I need, and then we both disconnect. Because when we were in the office, we were getting those more group related conversations, and, you know, just overhearing things or seeing what other people are up to, and then really connecting your employees so that they feel that they're a part of something and not just working in a silo, as we sometimes can feel sitting at our desk in our office. And then we mentioned things like the quick search for people directory. So if we were looking for just someone real quickly to help us with something, you know, we need help with HTML or something need to be coded, or we just want to see what people are doing, or maybe I just want to see who I've been working with recently, I can actually jump in here, say, you know what, I work a lot with, we'll say Odd here, and I can actually click in, get information around Odd, be able to see very quickly that she, what we've been working on, as well as sort of her organization or chart and other information, and directly communicate and work with her. These are all things that aren't apparently available in Microsoft Teams now, but we can bridge that gap, bring it in, and make it all easier. And then, you know, if you are a global company or you support multiple languages, we can also do things like very quickly translate and give you and give people the experience that they're expecting. And even while you're creating documents, you can translate inline or be able to get information out, as well as if we needed to just create content. So I want to come in, I want to make a new news, make a new news article to share with everyone. I'm going to be able to do that and come through, do manage content. And this is all within Teams, within the intranet. And you can see how we're able to quickly make that document, that application, whatever it is you may be looking for, see the ones that have been created recently and make more. And lastly, we do bring in this concept of everybody loves the activity feed, right? You come in beginning of the day, where's the first place you go? You go to your activities. So what we're able to do is actually come through and give you activities based on the full environment of Microsoft 365 instead of just Teams. So we can bring in the new events when you want people to know that there's something coming up. Of course, news. We also bring in modifications and any updates to documents that may have been altered. So you can see here I have a PowerPoint that's recently been updated, and we can even tie in employee spotlight. So if you want to give that, you know, kudos for something, or how, you know, great job on that project, you can do that and you can see it here. These are all pieces that I think really lend into making Microsoft Teams and your Microsoft experience more of a digital hub instead of sort of having these different segmentations where you can work at.
Right. Thank you so much. We've got two guests here. I'm really, really excited to introduce them. The first person I will introduce is Lindsay Walker. She is the Director of Learning and Development at Appiject Systems. Lindsay, welcome. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me. Happy to be here.
Great. And the next person I'd like to introduce is Bassam Al-Qassar. He is the Chief Technology Officer and Chief Information Officer and the IT guy, guru, the guy that everybody goes to whenever they've got an issue. Bassam Al-Qassar is here from Princess House. Thanks for joining us, Bassam.
Thank you for having me, Eric. Appreciate it.
So we've worked with both of you at this point on building out your intranet. We're also starting to do some work on Teams optimization and helping to the organization to leverage that tool more effectively and efficiently. And so before we kind of get into the approach, the process, and maybe some of the things that you've learned working through that, I'd love for you to just give us a little bit of background on, you know, the work that you do, your specific role, because you both come from very different sides of the house. So getting both of your perspectives, I think, is going to be really interesting. And how people in your organization are working at this time, you know, whether they're remote or hybrid or, you know, in the office, and then maybe how big of a shift, if anything, this has been. So Lindsay, I'll throw it to you first. Tell us a little bit more about you and Appiject.
For sure. So greetings, everybody. I am, as Eric mentioned, the Director of Learning and Development at a new company called Appiject Systems Corp. And we are a medical technology company trying to revolutionize the way we receive injectable medicine. And part of that has been being sucked into the global pandemic response for COVID-19. Our company is a few years old, but really kicked into high gear last year, as you might imagine, and we are fully virtual. So while we do have two concentrated areas of employees where we've set up some in-person offices, we run as a fully distributed company. So we have people across I think it's something like 12 time zones at this point. We're small and mighty, about 60 to 70 people. And it's been really interesting to start out as a digital organization, as a virtual organization. So we didn't go through the transition that most organizations went through of starting in person pre-March 2020 and then being forced into this virtual space. So we've been kind of learning along the way, bumps and bruises, and roped Stitch in to help us out.
It was our pleasure. It was our pleasure. Thank you so much. And yeah, it's, you know, we've just working with your organization. It's been interesting to see that, you know, as you've been transitioning from sort of a relatively small startup to a really big organization, and then evolving the needs as well through that process. So thanks very much for sharing that. Bassam, I'll ask you the same question. Tell us a little bit more about you, your organization, and how you're working. I know you guys have been around for a long time, so you very established organization, very different experience. I know.
Absolutely. Well, different. We are an organization of about 68 years, about 58. I'm sorry, 58 years old organization. We pretty much prior to the pandemic, we working remotely was a forbidden word. You know, with the opposite. Yeah. We grew up in a physical office, physical space. My role, as Eric described, I'm the vice president of IT. I'm a technology. I've been in this space for over 35 years, and we pretty much. I mean, we will talk more about experience down the line. We really were looked after when we hit the pandemic and we closed the office and we forced everybody to work remotely. We kind of accelerated the almost 5 years worth of technology and have people learn it in a short period. And we did lose the physical space that we've been used to it. We have average 10-year service people that are in the organization for almost 40 years. And all they know is the office, go in the morning in the office and interact with people. Now we ask them to work virtually. So again, this is how we came about, the Pulse product as well as the StitchDX partnership. And we're very grateful to that, to that experience. And really it's been helping us truly to reconnect the people, to reconnect, have them replace that physical space, As a matter of fact, we made a decision actually with the whole company now is virtually. We actually gave up our building and we downsize and we have a shared office, a very small office where if we need to do any collaboration, we'll reserve a space and use it. So this has been a great positive experience, and I don't think anybody will be looking back at what we had. And I'm going to use actually, as we're talking about this, as I told you, I'm old. I've been around for, in this profession 35 years. It's funny. The closest thing I can mention to this whole virtual workspace needed using digital, platform. I can recall in the 90s, the huge discussion. These days, we used to wear a tie and a suit, and you have to wear. So the discussion, should we go casual or not? That went out during the 90s into the 90s. If you think about it today, it's like, why would I want to wear a suit and a tie?
You never want to go back, right?
You must be casual these days. Well, guess what? I think in about a year or two, you must have a digital workspace.
That's a really interesting point. I've had this conversation with lots of people, and this might be a little bit of a controversial statement, but I think that the pandemic is to the business world and the digital workplace as 9/11 was for how we travel and fly and we just kind of, it fundamentally changed everything about how we traveled, right? Getting on a plane, you can't just go and meet your family member at the gate anymore. You have to wait for them downstairs or wait for them outside. You got to take your shoes off. You got to, get your laptop out of the bag. You got to go through all these security checks. We've just accepted it. It is the way of travel. And I think the pandemic has done the same thing. It's fundamentally changed the way that we work. And so the digital workplace is just a critical need now. It is critical infrastructure. So, to that point, I'll ask, tell me a little bit about the role of your digital workplace, both the intranet and Teams, and how your employees are working now. And maybe what are some of the challenges that your organization has been facing leading up to this decision to engage Powell and to engage StitchDX? And I'll throw it back to you, Lindsay. How are people using the digital workplace, and what were some of the challenges leading up to the decision to do more with it with us?
Absolutely. So when we started out, we were on Slack originally, and we had a big transition last summer, moving into Teams because we were going into the 365 space and for the security and all the good things that it brings. And the challenge was Teams has a lot more, for better, it has a lot of structure, a lot of different ways to engage. And we were pretty used to chat, and we did group chats. We had, it was kind of how Slack is run. And why the director of learning and development is involved in this is because we really had to teach people what virtual collaboration looks like. And getting people out of chat. Like once we got people into Teams, great, but they mostly lived in the chat. They struggled with conceptualizing, why would I do a post with a thread if I can just do a group chat? And where do I find files and all of those kinds of things? And so we had Teams before we had an intranet. And unfortunately, it was just a big learning curve. And I think everybody has felt that in different places throughout this last 18 months, especially, of how do you translate your collaboration skills that you've learned in person, turning to the person next to you, those serendipitous moments, how do you translate that into a virtual space? And we did as best we could for about 6 months, and just realized we really needed support in that. And so we needed the structure we had set up was fine, and we were kind of limping along, to be quite honest. And we really needed to understand how we could support those new behaviors that we were teaching everybody. And so that's where really we pulled you guys in to help us kind of find our way. And a big part of that, and what our actual first chunk of work has been with you guys, as you know, is really building the intranet. We were using Teams for a lot of things that Teams actually isn't built for. And so I think that's been a real challenge, especially as all these new tools are introduced, is really understanding what each tool is actually for and not trying to have it be something else. And so that's been a real learning experience we've had with you and your team.
Awesome. Well, thanks. We've certainly enjoyed working with you all. Bassam, I'll throw it to you. Tell me a little bit about the role of the digital workplace. Everyone was in the office up until last year. So, I'm curious how employees handled that transition, and was that the sort of critical moment when you realized, hey, we need something, we need it fast?
Absolutely. So our journey very similar. We invested in Office 365, maybe I would say about 5 years ago. And at that time, we were with Skype for Business, all those ugly applications, I call them, never really took off. We tried to use them within the IT area. Then Team was introduced, and we found the IT team was really loved it, from the IM chatting, etc. So then you're right, the pandemic hit. And then when the pandemic hit, we need a way to collaborate. And thank God everybody had Teams, but they didn't know how to use it. So we started the education and say, okay, this is how you can use Team. And primarily was used for really more of having collaboration calls, IM, conducted meetings, virtual meeting. Yes, also in the company was the organization, a lot of people using Zooms, using WebEx, Google Meetings. Everybody, when they saw what Team is capable of, really kind of shifted all their calls to Teams. We are really seeing now Team is maturing day by day in our organization. And we So we started with the calls and the IM and all that good stuff. Then we moved on where we found we started creating teams for projects, for initiative that's going on in the organization, and using that as a central repository of everything going on in the organization, within that project. So that's kind of started to mature. Now we're jumping into the wiki and the post and everything else. It's a progression because team is such a rich product, and Microsoft keeps on really building it and investing in it. And it's really, we kind of like brick by bricks, we're exploring it, and we're trying to get our team to adapt to that as well. So it's very, very similar. And, Eric, I totally agree with you. Similar to the 9/11, it's like it took a major event to really get people to commit to use the tool, and you're really that's what accelerate the whole process. Closing the office and say, okay, figure out how you're going to work from home and collaborate. At this point.
Yeah, and you're not alone. Certainly, there's lots of organizations that have had to adapt, and some organizations are better prepared and able to adapt more quickly, but not everyone is. We had a question actually in the Q&A that popped up a little bit earlier around how do you enable folks that are different levels of technological savvy? How do you handle that within the organization? And I'm curious because I know Bassam, particularly with an organization that is almost 60 years old, I know that there are lifers there, right? There are people that have been working there for some of them for their entire careers. How has this transition been, and are you finding that the process that we put in place to start utilizing the intranet as just a starting point, has that been working? And what has the transition been like?
It's a challenge. Great question. Absolutely, it's always a challenge, and because you're right, you have a different skills. We're not a technology company. We're a company that uses technology to do business. So that's always a challenge. But to be honest with you, because it's almost like no alternative. They have to figure out how to do this.
Yeah.
But they kind of left, we have to do it. This is a need. You cannot just walk in somebody's office and talk anymore. You have to use Team to chat to somebody, see if they're available. So that works to our advantage. Now, from our perspective, what we've been doing, we have an established help desk. We've been training our help desk to take, and support them. We have to support the organization as well. We have to support those people and understand you're right, they might not be the most technological person. And we support in two ways. One, provide them the knowledge. Two, exactly what you mentioned. Let's not try to bite more than we can chew. Let's do it in a small increment. I love you guys' term, most lovable product, Let's get them where, let's not try to do everything all at once. Do it in small pieces. And some people, they can accelerate, and you can move them on to the next phase faster than others. Other people, you really have to take your time and move them and manage that. So it is really a process. You have to pay attention. You have to manage it. Otherwise, some people, they're going to be left on the side of the road.
You segued so brilliantly for me. I was just going to talk about MLP, and this is a term that for those of you who are listening and watching may not know. MLP stands for minimally lovable product. We've adopted this approach a couple of years ago because we found that taking that sort of MVP approach, that minimally viable product approach, that is so common in implementations of intranets, doesn't really work. And the problem is that you're either trying to do everything and build an intranet and build a digital workplace solution that solves every problem in the entire organization, and 95% of the time it falls completely flat. And so it's a huge investment, and it doesn't end up working, and people don't use it, and you end up starting over, and so it's just lost all the value. The MLP approach, the minimally lovable product approach that we use, really focuses on defining the best value that we can create in the quickest amount of time. In other words, building an implementation that your end users will love, and defining that collectively with the organization so that you're working on something that people will actually use. We found that creating value very quickly at the onset of the project helps to drive utilization, and utilization drives a greater interest in evolving and growing it and utilizing it more. So that's what our MLP approach is, and we've used it very successfully with organizations, including both Abiject and Princess House. Lindsay, I'll throw this to you. Tell us a little bit about, I'd love to hear your perspective on how that MLP approach worked for your organization.
Definitely. So I think, right, it's always the challenge, as you said, of how to eat the elephant. And so we needed an intranet, we needed Teams help, we needed a lot of things. And so what the MLP allows us to focus on is adoption first, of like, you got to get people to love it for them to use it. And so we were able to realize, we need, people really want the intranet, that we're in Teams, it's coming. We're actually very excited. I think our implementation with you guys is in a week or two. But with the intranet, we focused on prioritizing kind of the champion teams that really needed to share information that the entire organization needed. And so with the MLP, what we focused on was getting those teams into the intranet and the information shared the most, because one of the features that I know I use the most is we didn't have kind of a common area for all of our tools and resources that everybody uses, those links to the different systems and all that. And so it's amazing the tax that 5 or 6 more clicks has, right? And that's really how we measure that time now. And so being able to reduce 6 clicks to 1 was just, everybody immediately was like, oh, thank goodness, I don't have to keep favoriting, I have to go find this, all that kind of stuff. So it's that when you're able to give people that time back, and it feels simple, right? It's like, of course, have a launch pad, but it was having that and having the right teams post to that launch pad first, and having news and those types of things really allowed that to really be loved.
And I love how you describe that. And we have, I should say, part of the process is that we define what the MLP is, and then we also define a roadmap, and we make that roadmap publicly available so that the organization can see, oh, there's all these cool new features coming, and it kind of drives interest and helps people come back more often. So it's really about creating that lovable experience that is also driving engagement, right? So it's an employee experience that also drives employee engagement. Bassam, can you just very quickly tell us, was that your experience as well? How did the MLP approach work for Princess House?
Oh, well, absolutely. I mean, as you're aware, we started with the intranet, and we really we're having a huge success right now with it, with people adapting to it and using it. That success comes in multiple ways. One of them is really give them things in small doses, let them achieve some success, let them feel something good about it. I can do this, so they can move on to the next. You don't want to climb the whole mountain in one leap. You just want, give them that small steps. So that's really been working great for us. I can't wait. I know we're working our next on the roadmap. We established the roadmap with you guys. I can't wait. We were looking next to do the team part of this, the governance of the team, and it's really works for our advantage. Absolutely, this. And we're looking to add more, it's just an ongoing right. I'll be honest with you, I mean, this is an approach I love, because it's really an approach with any software you make an investment in. And because to take advantage of everything any software can do all at once, it's an impossible task. Right. We have a term in our organization we use, production before perfection, similar to that.
Like that.
Let's get it in first, Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Getting people to use it and just use it effectively, I think, is definitely an important piece of it.
Absolutely.
So, you guys started getting into this a little bit. We have built out the intranet. Bassam, we're working on some workflow automations as well to help create more efficiency. I'm curious from your perspective, Bassam, from an IT perspective, what is the most important feature for you in the intranet, or just as part of the digital workplace solution that we built out, or will be building out, I should say as well? What is the most important functionality or feature for you in your role in IT?
I'll be honest with you, the most important feature is that directory search. When we know who's who reports to who, what department, who to talk to. Especially, to be honest with you, we have people that we hire after we close the office. They never seen an office. They never seen people face to face. This has been really helpful for them to say, okay, who's this person? What do they do? Know a little bit more about them. And we're encouraging people to put some information about themselves. FlexDesk is another one, to be honest with you, that's really been really great tools for us. I mean, one of the things I really love about the PAL also product, they keep on enhancing the product. And as throughout our project with the implementation, as you're aware, we have given some feedback, and we saw that feedback in an enhancement in the project and the product as we do. So we really appreciate that. And every month there's a mailing that comes out with all the enhancements. And it's very exciting. We've seen it, that we want to take with it. So if you ask me what's my favorite, I will say the directory. I like the FlexDesk. Be honest with you, I like the content that we've been shared on the platform. And what I like the most when I see people interact with that content, liking it, commenting on it, that's really one of my favorite personally as well.
I appreciate that. Thank you. Lindsay, same question to you from a learning and development perspective, or just generally as a user at your organization, an employee at your organization. What's the most or widely used feature for you in your role?
So we have a separate location where we house our learning content. So where we put courses and videos, all kinds of just fun things, recordings, we do courses, seminars, all that kind of stuff. And so it's the news feature and being able to use that to drive people to that content and highlight different content from a learning and development perspective has been critical. Otherwise, it's been this very cumbersome process. It gets lost in people's emails. We try and do a post on Teams, all kinds of things. But by having that news feature, it's rotating through, and it allows people to see kind of our most recent recommendations of what we'd like them to look at. From a company-wide perspective, what is also nice about the news feature is our internal communications team is able to give updates at various times about both fun things. We were just at a convention this week and a group of our team was together. It's always exciting to have a group photo. They're rare moments for us, all the way to important updates from the people department of benefits changes and things like that, all in one place. So being able to mix that, because you don't really have the message board in our virtual world. We're not in the same place. And that feature has been able to allow us to just communicate consistently in a format that makes it easy to digest, so people don't feel that they have to go search for it, kind of where is this, what is this, all of that. So that the news feature has been, both for learning and the company and at large, has been a really useful feature.
That's great. Thank you very much for sharing that. Yeah, I mean, I think generally what we've seen from lots of organizations that we work with, those tend to be the top features, right? Bassam, you mentioned FlexDesk, this hoteling feature that exists that we're seeing more and more organizations are downsizing their footprint because they don't need to have all that overhead anymore, and so they're utilizing the office space more or less frequently, but it's still valuable and important. And so being able to bring in teams or small groups in there, and then they can go in and kind of see who else is there, and do I need to collaborate with them, and can I show up? So that's been important. News, we also know, is really important as well. And so I'm wondering for both of you, what are some of the barriers? Have there any barriers to adoption, particularly around just the challenges of teams? One of the things I've come across a lot is how has how Teams is being used in different organizations. It's such a flexible platform, as you mentioned, Bassam, that you can really set it up any way you want. You can have a team for departments, you can have a team for projects, you can have a team just for 2 people to get together. And I think, Lindsay, you also mentioned this, that people didn't really know how to utilize it when they first got it. It was just, here's a tool that you can use so that you're not you're not totally isolated from the world. You can get connected with the rest of your organization, but at the same time, there was really no governance. There was no rules of the road. So what are the things that you're looking for, and particularly around things that we're going to be implementing, or we have already started implementing, around Powell Teams, the templates that are used, the governance? What are some of the things that you're looking for and that your organization really needs right now? And Lindsay, I'll throw that to you.
Okay, I think for us, governance is, we kind of implemented a prior solution for governance just to prevent the mess that can happen in SharePoint if people are creating teams willy-nilly. The problem is that we didn't really think through or get guidance that we really needed, as evident from our work with you guys, of what do those templated teams look like? How can we teach people to use those? And so while we set up kind of some basic infrastructure, told people, hey, this is how posts work, here's an example of how we use this team, how this group uses a team, because we unfortunately used Teams for too many things, it also became a data management system for us. Like, it was, oh, we can dump shared files in there because it's really SharePoint. And, we just didn't really create the lines on the road. We may have paved them a little, but the lines need to be there, and stop signs and all that kind of stuff. So I think we're really looking forward to showing how creating a team can look very different in different contexts. I think one of the use cases we were excited about was for onboarding, for example, how you can create a team for a new person and create this entire structured setup, because all of our onboarding is remote. We don't sit side by side with someone. We don't meet with them face to face. They open their computer and day one happens, right? So that experience needs more structure, and having a team for that person can really provide that guidance, a checklist, like all those types of things. So that's something from a governance perspective we're really looking forward to learning how to do.
Yeah, onboarding is such an important feature of Powell Teams, and unfortunately we didn't have time to demo that, but if anybody's interested, let me know. We're happy to show that. But yeah, I mean, onboarding is particularly one of the challenges that I think every organization is struggling right now, because you don't have that in-person experience. You don't get to walk that person in and walk them over to so-and-so's desk and this other person's desk and say, this is what you go to them for. This is what you go to. So they are very much on their own. And that's scary. I think it's scary for the employee that's starting up. I think it's probably scary for the manager. I think it's probably scary for the people that they're going to be working with and collaborating with. So that is one of those features that I think is really beneficial, and will be super helpful for lots of organizations. Bassam, I'll pose the same question to you, particularly around Teams. We were working on automations and workflows that were very, they were being pushed around in email, but when you were in person, it was probably a lot easier to make sure that, hey, did you get my email? Did you see that? Did you approve it? You need, what else do you need? You don't have that same sort of experience. So we started building out this automation, this workflow automation that leverages Teams to create approval processes, and it's customized based on the different types of approvals needed. And I'm, I'd love to hear your perspective on that, how that functionality, how you see that in enabling and empowering your users.
It's, be honest, you looking at it and what we can do with it. Like you said, we really it's going to help us, these flying emails back and forth with attachments, and not really, it just, the emails was completely engine is out of control. Having a central repository and the workflow, and instead of now going through an email and try to read the whole thread to figure out what's your part versus, receive a notification. This is your part. This is all you have to do. It's a huge plus. Now, as you're aware, Eric, it took a lot of convincing for the first pioneers to adapt to this.
Yeah.
And I'm looking for some patience to get this. But I am a true believer when we launch this, there's going to be such something that people are going to want more of, that we have to really keep on feeding that, because we have a lot of areas right now. We create, like you said, email is it. The IM is the central way to talk. I know we just talked about we're using also Team for the central repository for files. That's also a shift for us from where we've been using shared drives. We still have some. We're trying to shift people to more use Teams and put that those files within their teams, and they can collaborate much better and track these files as well. So that's also an initiative that we are driving as well, and we will continue to drive that, and people start to see the benefit of it. The toughest thing is just to convince them to get started on it. As soon as we get started, I'm a true believer. People, they're going to love this, and we're starting to see more excitement about it.
Yeah, I agree, and I think that once they start using it more, I think you're right. I think there are challenges, right? And this is part of change management. I think it's something that we've seen a lot. Particularly when you're going from nothing to something really big, or if you're going from something that people are just used to doing and they're just used to doing the same thing over and over again that way. Having a different approach is difficult. It's challenging, and change management has to be a critical part of the planning process for any intranet experience, really any digital workplace experience. Whether you're starting to use Teams for the first time or you've been using Teams for a long time, and now you're starting to realize that you've got data sprawl, you've got things in different places, there's no naming conventions, people aren't sure what to find. And Microsoft is great, but it's not perfect. And the search experience, for example, in Teams is not great. So having that search experience in your intranet that lives inside of Teams, that can see everything and help you find the right things that you need at the right time, is one of the ways that we help to sort of adapt that change and manage some of that change. But change management is challenging. Lindsay, I've got a question for you. So when you're particularly in your role as in learning and development, you've got your team has been spending a lot of time helping folks sort of adapt to this new world, right? The digital world. That I know that you could do lunch and learns, for example, not specifically on the internet, but on lots of different pieces of this. One question that came in through the Q&A was, what have you been doing to help support employees learning these new skills, particularly in the digital workplace?
Absolutely. So we have developed, we do a lot of what we call live learning. So seminars, workshops, we schedule about 2 to 3 what we call learning events a week. People can tune in. We record all of them because not everybody can join all the time. And we have specifically 2 programs that target kind of the 2 big pillars of the challenges in the digital workplace. The first we call Tech Boot Camp, and it's just productivity, click-throughs, all of those types of things. And we mostly spend our time in the Microsoft world, right? And there's a plethora of apps that a lot of our employees actually just don't know exist and would make tasks easier. One of my favorites is Showing People Planner. I think it's an incredibly useful tool, just all the ways you can translate a Kanban board. We have a lot of project-based work. And so showing people how to use Planner in the first place, integrate it into Teams has been really great, right? You just add it as a tab, and being able to tag people, and that conceptually has been really wonderful. So we explicitly teach in Tech Bootcamp around specific applications and requests from people. We've done ones on PowerPoint, for example, of just how to do that virtually, presenting virtually. And the other we call, we as one of our agreements is we're trailblazers, and we call it Trailblaze Toolkit, and that actually covers our workplace behavior. And so looking at how do you demonstrate empathy, which is a critical leadership skill, through a virtual screen, right? It can be really challenging to have difficult conversations, for example, in a virtual space, because you usually use a lot of body language to be able to indicate kind of that empathy, helping with processing that. And so we actually explicitly teach those skills and talk through, all right, when you're in a virtual place, here's what's shifted, because if you don't name it, you can't change it. And so it's one of the big things has been, how do you do that with the tools we have, because your in-person arsenal is no longer a set of tools you can use, but we have great tools at our fingertips here, Powell being one of them. All of the Microsoft tools, honestly, are just wonderful. So we explicitly teach a lot of those things, and from a kind of what are often called soft skills. I like to think of them as critical skills, but empathy and time management, all of those kinds of things, leadership skills really, and what that looks like with these tools.
Well, that's great, and I appreciate that. And I totally agree. I think EQ is incredibly important, and the value of thinking about the digital workplace as a sort of ecosystem that you live in, that you work in, and then all the skills that are necessary to be able to function within that ecosystem, I think is really important. And it's certainly part of the change management process that I think is critical to ensuring that you have a successful digital workplace. I want to thank you both for being here and for taking the time to spend with us and to share both of your experiences. You come from such different backgrounds, but I think the one sort of big takeaway I took from this was that the value of the digital workplace is really, really critical, not only in helping folks learn and in their personal development, but just how they function in the workplace. And it's such a critical need today. I think it's going to continue to be a critical need in the future. So again, thank you both. Lindsay, I really appreciate your time. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you.
And Bassam, thank you so much for being with us as well. And we will continue to talk.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks so much.
All right,
For those of you that are with us still, there's if you have any questions or you'd love to just learn more about the experiences that either Bassam or Lindsay or their organizations have had, feel free to reach out to us. We're happy to put you in touch with them if you'd like to chat with them a little bit more about that. So that ends our big sessions. Of course, we've got that one more big giveaway coming up in just a minute, but I wanted to just take a second here to sort of wrap up our big summit that we've just held in a very short period of time. What we've heard and what we've gone through, I think, are really the big challenges that we've experienced, right? The human challenges that Matt shared with us about just having to work in this new environment and having to juggle all of the challenges that we have, both as employees and just as people. Whether you're young and feeling isolated, whether you're at home with kids and having to juggle families, or you're empty nesting and you've got your own space, but you just need that connection. There are challenges to that on every level, and also having to learn new tools and having to adapt to those new processes that are being established on the fly as we all kind of learn how to deal with this. So those are the human challenges. There's technological challenges and how we use those tools effectively, efficiently, and consistently across the organization. How do we establish these norms, whether they're naming conventions or just knowing where to find something that we need? If everyone has their own space, their own place in the digital workplace, it can be really, really difficult and can actually create more problems than what the digital workplace is there to try and solve. So having those that governance in place to sort of manage that data sprawl is really critical. And then the organizational challenges. How do we keep our employees aligned to the vision, to the mission of the business, and then also keep workers motivated and productive collaborators from wherever they happen to be? And we heard from Lindsay and Bassam just now about how we solve some of those problems, whether it's taking that MLP approach to implementation so that you're able to actually do this in a way that's digestible, that's manageable, so that your employees actually love the experience that you're creating for them, that it drives greater engagement, and also being just thoughtful about the types of tools that you're putting in place and the rules that you're putting in place for them to be able to utilize it. So we've covered these big challenges, human challenges, technological challenges, organizational challenges. If you'd like to join us for any other conversations, please feel free to reach out to us. Feel free to reach out to me, and you can contact me, or you can contact our StitchDX team, or you can contact our Powell partners, Powell software partners. Thank you so much for being here with us. Thank you so much.